Life, for me, had always been like a quiet stream flowing into rivers that were not my own. I drifted, carried along by others' currents, first my parents, then my husband, and now, at 67, by my son and his wife. My name is Theodora Abernathy, and until recently, I had never known what it meant to truly live for myself. My life had always been defined by the needs and expectations of others. My husband, Prentice, was a high school math teacher. On the surface, the image of intelligence and order. At home, however, he was a cold-eyed tyrant. For 28 long years, I followed his schedules, carefully filled out his journals, washed his perfectly pressed white shirts, and endured constant lectures about my shortcomings. Not smart enough, not organized enough, not good enough. 4 years ago, when he suffered a stroke, I admit I felt a small, guilty relief. Freedom seemed finally within reach, but life had other plans. Before I could fully breathe, my only son, Lawrence, stepped in, taking the reins of my existence. He was a modern echo of his father, more polished, more rational, but no less controlling. "Mum," he said one evening a month after Dad's funeral, "you realize at your age it's not wise to live alone." And so, a plan was set in motion. Victoria, my sister-in-law, and I discussed it. It would be better for you to sell the house and move into the guest house on our property. They decided, and I, as I always did, agreed. I quietly sold the home I had lived in for nearly 3 decades, placed most of the proceeds into my granddaughter Emmeline's education fund, and moved into a neat, postage stamp-sized outbuilding on their property. Victoria, with her perfect blonde hair, flawless French manicure, and carefully poised smile that never reached her eyes, treated me as a piece of furniture, inconvenient, tolerated, but never truly welcome. "Theodora, darling, could you not cook your experiments when we have guests?" she would say, wrinkling her nose at my specialty stew. I stopped cooking. I ate pre-made meals, supermarket salads, foods that required no effort, no spice, no scent that might disturb her sense of perfection. "Lawrence and I are thinking of painting the guest house grey," Victoria announced one day, ignoring my objections. My beige walls had warmth and comfort on cloudy days, but I nodded, agreeing silently. For 3 years, my life became a lesson in invisibility. I became the family babysitter when needed, a ghost when not. I dressed in muted tones, spoke quietly, took up as little space as possible, learning to disappear in every room. Then, the unexpected happened. Lawrence won an award for his architectural project, a historic neighborhood renovation in Boston. Victoria saw it as the perfect excuse for a cultural enrichment family trip. "We're going to Italy," she announced at dinner. 2 weeks through Tuscany. Authentic cuisine, medieval architecture, vineyards. I smiled quietly, but Victoria's gaze shifted to me, the peculiar smile prefiguring a trap. "And you, Theodora?" she asked sweetly. "You'll look after the house while we're away." Habitually, I nodded in agreement, but Lawrence intervened. "Actually," he said, tone polite but firm, "I was thinking of taking Mother with us. It will broaden her horizons. She's never been to Europe." Victoria's face froze for a moment, but she recovered quickly. "What a wonderful idea, darling. A family trip is just what we need." Packing was tense and exhausting. Victoria created detailed lists for each of us, including me, selecting outfits that were elegant but entirely unlike what I would have chosen. A new suitcase, impersonal grey, replaced the bright blue floral one I had bought for myself, a small symbol of unfulfilled travel dreams. "Mother, your old suitcase looks like it survived a war," Lawrence said, handing me the gift. I hid the blue suitcase deep in the closet, reluctant to let it go. The flight was long. 10 hours of staring out the window while my granddaughter Emmeline watched cartoons. Victoria leafed through glossy design magazines and Lawrence worked on his laptop. I simply tried to imagine the world waiting for me beyond the airplane's walls. From Florence, we drove to Glenview, a tiny Tuscan hill town, where Victoria had booked a villa for 2 weeks. I pressed my face against the car window, absorbing the scenery. Cypresses lining the roads like silent sentinels, fields of sunflowers like golden seas, terraces of vineyards cascading down the hills, all bathed in a warm, glowing light that seemed to seep from the earth itself. "Do you like it, Mother?" Lawrence asked, noticing my quiet wonder. "It is more beautiful than I could have imagined," I whispered. Victoria quickly reminded me. "Don't forget, this isn't just for sightseeing. Lawrence wants to study local architecture for his project. We have tours, meetings with architects, historic site visits. You're here to chaperone Emmeline, not enjoy the scenery." I nodded silently. Of course. My life had never been mine to enjoy. Glenview was charming, cobblestoned, with terracotta roofs and a quaint central square. Our villa was stone, 2 stories, overlooking olive groves and vineyards. I was assigned a modest room on the first floor near the kitchen. "You'll be most comfortable here, Mother," Lawrence said. I did not protest, did not mention the view I had dreamed of. I had learned to be content with whatever was given. The first few days were a blur of scheduled activities, excursions, wine tastings, and children's workshops for Emmeline. The tension between Victoria and me grew with each passing day. She corrected my voice, my clothes, my manners with relentless precision. "Theodora, please don't speak so loudly to the locals. Your accent is terrible. That looks like a prop from an old movie." I complied quietly, as I always did. Then, on the 5th day, the accident happened that would begin to change everything. Victoria had purchased an expensive creamy silk dress in Florence and left it hanging in the bathroom to smooth out the minor wrinkles. I entered the bathroom to wash my face, accidentally turning on the shower and soaking both myself and the delicate dress. Victoria's scream was like a gunshot, echoing through the villa. "You did that on purpose. Always jealous of me, ruining my life," she shrieked. I backed against the wall, silent, trembling. "It was an accident," I whispered. Lawrence appeared, eyes wide, and Victoria launched into her accusations. 3 years of passive aggression, manipulation, sabotage. I felt something within me break, something more enduring than my heart, a final thread of self-respect, perhaps. "I apologize," I murmured, my voice barely audible. "Mom will pay for the dress," Lawrence said, wrapping his arm around Victoria, "and she will apologize." I nodded quietly, as I always did. Of course, I would pay. Of course, I would apologize. I did not need her money or her forgiveness. Victoria gritted her teeth. She wanted me to understand my place. That night, I lay awake long after everyone had gone to sleep, listening to Victoria and Lawrence talking about me through the thin walls, realizing that something deep inside me had shifted. I heard the phrases. "It was always like this, unbearable, ruin the trip." I heard Lawrence trying to calm her down, promising to fix the problem. I was that problem. I was always the problem. In the morning at breakfast, the atmosphere was taut as a string. Victoria defiantly ignored me. Lawrence was unusually silent. Only Emmeline chirped about seeing a lizard on the terrace. "We're going to the winery today," Lawrence finally said. "A tour and a tasting." "Mum, I think you should stay home. You'll be bored." I realized that it was not a suggestion, but a decision. I was being left at home like a naughty child. I nodded silently. That day was the harbinger of the storm that was about to break. After the incident with the dress, I spent the next 3 days practically in isolation. Lawrence and Victoria would leave early in the morning, taking Emmeline with them, and return late at night when I was already pretending to sleep. They visited museums, restaurants, wineries, and I stayed at the villa like an inconvenient piece of luggage that can't be left in the luggage room. That morning, when my introduction to Clementine happened, I felt an acute, painful loneliness for the first time in years. Not the usual loneliness around people that I had grown accustomed to over decades of marriage, but a real physical loneliness in a foreign country, in a foreign house, with emptiness all around. I was sitting on the terrace with a cup of cooled tea when I noticed her, a woman in her 50s, wearing a wide linen tunic stained with paint, her unruly red hair gathered in a careless bun. She was standing on a hill behind an olive grove with an easel, working passionately with a brush. Something in her free pose, in her confident movements, in the way the wind fluttered her hair, and she didn't even try to smooth it, fascinated me. I don't know what came over me, but I got up, threw on a light shawl, and walked through the grove toward her. Maybe it was the despair of loneliness. Maybe it was some vague premonition of change. Buongiorno, I said as I approached her, and was immediately embarrassed. It was the only Italian word I knew, aside from the names of the dishes on the menu. The woman turned around and smiled at me. She had amazing eyes, the color of young leaves speckled with gold. "Good afternoon," she said in perfect English with a slight accent. "You must be from Villa Monteverde American." I nodded, surprised. "I could see you." She pointed to the villa's terrace. "You always sit there alone in the morning, cup in hand. You can sit there for hours without moving. You remind me of a statue of grief." Her directness should have offended me, but instead I felt strangely relieved. I was noticed. Someone had seen me, even if only as a statue of grief. "My name is Theodora," I said. "Clement." She held out her paint-stained hand to me. "I'm sorry for the mess. I forget everything when I'm working." I shook her hand gingerly, afraid of getting dirty, and the gesture suddenly seemed so ridiculous, so Victoriesque, that I laughed out of the blue. "Is anything wrong?" Clementine asked with a smile. No, it's just, I shook my head. "I'm afraid of paint on my hands, like a baby." "Oh, you absolutely have to get dirty," she exclaimed with such enthusiasm, as if she were offering the greatest pleasure in the world. "It's liberating. Would you like to try it, Dash?" She nodded at her easel. "Oh no, I didn't know how to." "It's not about skill," she interrupted. "It's about feeling. Come on, just one stroke. What have you got to lose?" I hesitated, but something in her lively eyes, in her smile, gave me courage. I took the brush she held out, dipped it in the bright blue paint, and tentatively drew a line across the canvas. "That's it." Clementine smiled. "You are now officially an artist." "I ruined your painting," I muttered, staring at my clumsy blue line across her landscape. "You changed it," she corrected. "That's different. It's our work together now. And you know, your stroke added exactly what was missing. Heavenly freedom." I looked at her, trying to see if she was joking, but her face was completely serious. "Are you here with your family?" she asked, returning to her work. "With my son, his wife, and granddaughter. And they leave you alone. They have plans of their own." I didn't want to complain to a stranger. "They've come to study architecture. My son is an architect." "Oh, I see." She nodded. "And what do you do alone all day long?" I was confused. What do I do? Sitting, staring off into space, thinking about how everything went wrong in my life. "Nothing much," I answered quietly. Clementine stopped drawing and looked at me carefully. "It's a crime," she said firmly. To be in Tuscany and do nothing. It's like dying of thirst next to a spring. Let's go. Where to? I backed away involuntarily. To the city. I'll show you the real Glen. View, not the tourist postcards your son sees. But I can't. They'll be back when? Tonight. Oh, that's great. We have Apple Day. Come on, Theodora. Stop being a statue. And I'm going. I don't know. Maybe out of curiosity. Maybe out of desperation. Or maybe because for the first time in a long time, someone wanted my company, not just a tolerated. Clementine showed me a Glen view I hadn't seen before. Not a tourist town from glossy brochures, but a living, breathing organism. We went into a tiny bakery where the gay-haired baker treated us to hot bread straight from the oven. To the herbalist's shop where he smelled of rosemary, thyme and some unfamiliar herbs. To a small market where local farmers were selling vegetables, cheese and olive oil. See that woman over there? Clementine nodded at an elderly Italian woman selling cheese. She's 83 years old and she gets up at 4 a.m. every day to make fresh cheese. She says the secret to her longevity is loving what she does. What about you? I asked. Do you love what you do? I live what I do, she answered simply. Art is not a job or a hobby. It's a way of being. We sat in a small cafe in the square, drinking wine despite the early hour. It's never too early for good wine in Italy, Clementine added. And I listened to her stories about Glen View, about the people, about the life. Clementine was born in Milan, studied art in Paris, lived in New York, but at 35 escaped the madness of the big city and settled here. She painted, sold paintings to tourists, and occasionally taught at an art school in Florence. And your family? I asked. My family is me, she smiled. I've never found a man I wanted to share my life with permanently. There have been lovers, of course, and now there is one. A beautiful man from Marseille, a painter like me. We meet a few times a year. That's enough, I blushed, unaccustomed to such frankness. I'm sorry if I embarrassed you, Clementine said, noticing my embarrassment. I forget that Americans are more restrained in such matters. No, it's all right, I murmured. It's just that I've lived differently. Tell me, she suggested, and I did, about Apprentice, about the years of submission, about how after his death I'd been controlled by me son and daughter-in-law, about how I'd lost myself to the point where I no longer remembered who I'd once been. The words poured out of me like water from a burst dam. My mom never taught me toasting up for myself, I said. She said, be a good wife, don't cause trouble, and I was. I wasn't a troublemaker. I just, disappeared. But you're here, Clementine, sighed, covering my hand with hers. You didn't disappear, and it's never too late to start existing. When we got back to the villa, it was well past noon. I was afraid that Lawrence and Victoria might return early and discover my absence, but the house was empty. Come tomorrow, said Clementina, bidding me farewell. I shall paint in the same place and bring something blue. Why? I wondered. You'll see. She winked and walked away, humming something in Italian. I returned to the house feeling strange, as if I had awakened from a long sleep. The world around me seemed brighter, the sounds clearer, the smells more intense. I felt hungry for the first time in many days and made myself a simple supper of food, bought at the market. When Lawrence, Victoria and Emmeline returned in the evening, I was sitting on the terrace with a book I had found in the villa library, a volume of Dante's poems in English. Mother, are you still awake? Lawrence was surprised. As you can see, I answered, and something in my tone made him look at me more closely. Where have you been today? Victoria asked instead of greeting me. We called the villa in the afternoon. No one answered. I went for a walk, I said simply. Out alone in a strange city. There was disbelief in her voice. Not exactly alone. I met a local artist, Clementine. She showed me around. Victoria and Lawrence exchanged glances. Mother, are you sure that's so sensible? Lawrence asked cautiously. Getting talk no strangers. You don't know the language. You don't know the local customs. Clementine speaks English better than many Americans. I said, and she's lived here for 20 years. I think she knows the local customs well enough. All the same, Mother, Victoria interjected. You shouldn't leave without telling us. We were worried. Worried. I couldn't help the irony. Worried enough to call only once all day? Lawrence frowned. Mom, what's wrong with you? You seem different. Different today. I could feel the change myself, but I couldn't explain it. It was as if something had shifted inside of me, like a toggle switch had gone from submissive to an unknown state. I was just tired of sitting in four walls. I said more softly. How was your day? Victoria looked at me suspiciously, but Lawrence seemed happy to change the subject. Excellent. We visited an ancient villa from the 16th century. Stunning architecture, unique solutions for ventilation and natural light. And then we had lunch at a Michelin-starred restaurant. Emmeline even tasted the truffles. Can you imagine? They're weird. Emmeline put in like earth, only tastier. I smiled. At my granddaughter. And tomorrow? What are your plans for tomorrow? A trip to Florence for the whole day. Lawrence's Gallery, Ponte Vecchio, the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore. A busy program. You don't mind staying home, do you, Theodora? It wasn't a request. It was a statement from Victoria. Emmeline is tired of long excursions and she needs a good rest, not running around museums. Actually, I took a deep breath. I have plans of my own for tomorrow. Plans? Victoria raised a perfectly plucked eyebrow. What kind of plans? I've arranged to meet with Clementine again. She's going to teach me how to paint. Drawing. Lawrence laughed. Mum, you've never been interested in art. Dad tried to get you into the Museum of Modern Art in Boston. Remember? You said you'd rather go to the dentist. That was 30 years ago, Lawrence. I said quietly. People change. Not at your age. Victoria muttered under her breath, but loud enough for me to hear. Well, Lawrence looked puzzled, but not alarmed. I think it's good that you found something to do. Just be careful and be back before dark. Victoria threw him an annoyed look, but remained silent. The next morning, they left early, and I met Clementine again on the hill. I had brought a blue scarf with me, the only blue thing I could find in my closet. It's beautiful, she exclaimed when she saw the scarf. Just what I needed. Today we are going to draw freedom. How can you draw freedom? I wondered how you feel it. She answered simply, close your eyes. Imagine that you are completely free from everything, from expectations, from fears, from the past. What do you see? I closed my eyes and tried to imagine. At first, nothing came to mind but banal images, birds, clouds, the open sea. But then suddenly I saw myself standing on a hilltop with my arms out to the sides, my grey hair waving in a bright blue dress as blue as my suitcase had once been. I see myself, I said, opening my eyes. A different me. Paint her. Clementine nodded, holding out her brush to me. I'd never painted before, except for scribbling as a child and helping Lawrence with his homework in elementary school. My first attempts had been clumsy, the lines tentative, but Clementine didn't criticize, didn't correct. She just sat beside me, occasionally encouraging me with a nod or a smile. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, she said. There are no mistakes. In art, only different paths. By noon, I had something remotely resembling a human figure on a hill. It was primitive, naive, but when I looked at my drawing, I felt a strange satisfaction. "It's awful," I said, but without shame or self-deprecation. "It's honest." Clementine objected. "And honesty is the most important thing in art and in life." After painting, we went into town again. This time, Clementina took me to a small gallery tucked away in a side street where local artists were exhibiting their work. "The souls of Glenview are collected here," she said as she led me past paintings, sculptures, and installations. "Each work is a piece of someone's life, someone's truth." I had never understood modern art, but listening to Clementine's explanations, looking at works through her eyes, I began to see things that had eluded me before. Emotions, stories, pain, and joy captured in colors and shapes. "You're an amazing teacher," I said as we left the gallery. "Because I don't teach," Shesmiled. "I just help you see what you already know but have forgotten." We had lunch at a small restaurant that served real, homemade pasta, not touristy versions of Italian dishes. The owner, an elderly Italian with a bushy mustache, was a friend of Clementine's, and when he learned I was American, he insisted on treating me to a special dessert, panna cotta with berries. "To new beginnings," he said in broken English, raising his glass of limoncello. "Here's to new beginnings," I echoed, feeling the warmth spreading through my body, and not just from the strong liquor. When we returned to the villa, I was full of impressions and new thoughts. Clementine promised to show me her studio tomorrow and introduce me to other artists. "You make me feel alive," I said goodbye. "It's not me." She shook her head. "It's you. You've always been alive, Theodora. You've just forgotten it." That evening, when Lawrence, Victoria, and Emmeline returned from Florence, I noticed that the atmosphere between them was tense. Victoria was clearly unhappy about something. Lawrence looked tired, and Emmeline was cranky. "How was your day?" I asked, as we sat down to dinner. "Fine," Lawrence answered automatically, but his tone said otherwise. It would be better if someone didn't throw tantrums in the middle of the gallery. Victoria hissed, glancing at Emmeline. "And if Somione else didn't indulge her whims." "She's tired, Victoria." Lawrence sighed. "She's 8 years old. She can't go to museums for 6 hours without a break. Other children can." Victoria parried. "Children from cultured families will appreciate art and history." "I was bored," Emmeline declared. "They're Arianly pictures and paintings, and you can't run around, and you can't talk loudly." And how was your day, Mother?" Lawrence interrupted her, evidently trying to change the subject. I opened my mouth to talk about my impressions about the gallery, the restaurant, the painting, but something in the expression on Victoria's face stopped me. There was irritation, fatigue, and something else. Envy. Could she really be jealous of my day with Clementine? "Okay," I said briefly. "I've been drawing." "And what did you draw?" Victoria asked with ill-concealed sarcasm. "Freedom?" I answered simply. Victoria snorted, but Emmeline was interested. "What does freedom look like, grandmother?" she asked. "Like a man on a hill with his arms outstretched." I smiled at my granddaughter in a blue dress. "Can I see it?" "Sure, honey. I'll show you tomorrow." "Tomorrow we have a trip to Siena planned." Victoria intervened. "A whole day. And I think she looked meaningfully at Lawrence that grandmother should come with us. Emmeline will be calmer with her, and we'll be able to see more." I realized what was happening. Victoria was trying to destroy my non-independence to revert me to being a convenient babysitter. Actually, I took a deep breath. "I have other plans." Clementine invited me to a studio. "Clementine again," Victoria said irritably. "Who is she anyway? What do we know about her?" I know enough, I answered calmly. She's an artist. She teaches in Florence. She's lived here for 20 years. And you met her 2 days ago, Victoria exclaimed. She could be anything. A swindler, a con artist. Vic, Lawrence said cautioningly. No, Lawrence, it's important. She turned to him. Your mother is an elderly American, a perfect target for swindlers. This artist can gain her trust and then rob her blind. It happens to tourists all the time. Clementine is not interested in my money, I said firmly. We haven't even talked about it. Of course we haven't. Victoria rolled her eyes. Not yet. Put your guard down first, and then enough. I raised my voice, something I rarely did. I'm not a child, Victoria. I'm not a senile old woman. I'm capable of deciding who I want to talk to. There was silence. Lawrence looked at me with surprise. Emmeline with curiosity and Victoria with fury. Lawrence, she said at last, say something to your mother. Lawrence looked uncomfortable, caught between two fires. Mother, he began cautiously. Victoria is just worried about you. We're all worried. You're in a foreign country. You don't know the language. I'm learning, I interrupted him. Clementine is teaching me basic phrases, and I'm not going to do anything dangerous or reckless. Mom, Lawrence sighed. Maybe Victoria is right. Maybe you should come with us tomorrow. It'll be fun. I promise. And we'll all be together as a family. Like your family, I repeated slowly. We haven't been like a family for a long time, Lawrence. And you know it. I got up from the table. I'm sorry, but I'm tired. I'm going to bed. I have a big day. As I walked up the stairs to my room, I could hear Victoria saying something heatedly to Lawrence, and he was trying to calm her down. I knew this wasn't the end of the conflict, just the beginning. But for the first time in a long time, I felt no fear of confrontation. Something had changed in me in those 2 days, and that change was irreversible. The morning began with silence. Usually at this time, I could already hear Victoria giving orders in the kitchen, Lawrence on the phone with colleagues in Boston, Emmeline begging for permission to watch a cartoon before breakfast. But today there was a tense silence in the house. I left the room and immediately ran into Lawrence in the hallway. His face was unaccustomadly grim. Good morning, I said, trying to sound casual. Mum, we need to talk, he replied, not answering the greeting. In the kitchen, I followed him in silence. Victoria was sitting in the kitchen, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, a cup of coffee in her hands. Her tense posture and tight lips didn't bode well. Sit down, please, Lawrence said, pointing to the chair across from Victoria. I sat down, feeling my heart start to beat faster. It reminded me of those moments in my childhood when I'd been summoned to the principal's office. The same sense of inevitable punishment. Mother, Lawrence began in the formal tone he usually used with clients. Victoria and I are concerned about your behavior these past few days. My behavior? I questioned, not believing my ears. What exactly is it that's bothering you? This new friend? Victoria interjected, not hiding her dislike. This Clementine, we've been making inquiries about her. Inquiries? I felt a wave of indignation rising inside me. What kind of inquiries? It doesn't matter. Victoria dismissed me. What's important is what we found out. This woman is not who she says she is. What do you mean? I looked at Lawrence, waiting for a clear explanation. Victoria spoke to the villa manager. He said he knows all the locals. According to him, Clementina Rossi is indeed an artist, but she has a questionable reputation. Questionable. I frowned. What do you mean? She lives unconventional. Lawrence was obviously choosing his words. She's constantly changing partners, men and women. She was involved in some scandal in Florence a few years ago. Something to do with drugs. That's ridiculous. I shook my head. Clementina was openly telling me about her life. Yes. She has a friend in Marseille that she meets up with sometimes. Yes, she doesn't live the conservative lifestyle, but she's an honest, open person. She's using you, Mom. Lawrence leaned toward me. You're an older American woman, obviously wealthy. A perfect target for what? I was getting angry. Clementine didn't take a dime from me. On the contrary, she bought me lunch, showed me the city, taught me how to paint. It's Khaled gaining her trust. Victoria sneered. It's a classic scheme. First small gifts, then a big request. Lend me money for my sick mother's surgery. Help me pay off my studio debt, whatever. I looked at them and didn't recognize them. When did my son, my kind, intelligent boy, turn into this suspicious, controlling person? When had he let it happen? Look, I said as calmly as I could. I appreciate your concern. Ido, that you're wrong about Clementine and about me. I'm not a naive old woman who's easily fooled. I just found someone I'm interested in. For the first time in a long time, Mom. Lawrence sighed. We just want to protect you from what? From friendship. From new experiences. From life. From disappointment, he said. From possible deption from myself. I finished quietly. That's what you want to protect me from. From being able to live my own life. Victoria set the cup down sharply on the table. Stop being so dramatic, Theodora. No one's stopping you from living your own way. But there are limits to what's reasonable. And meeting a questionable person in a foreign country is out of bounds. Questionable to whom? I looked her straight in. Thea, to you. For your idea of a proper life. For any sane person. Victoria raised her voice. Lawrence, tell her. Lawrence looked uncomfortable. Caught between two fires. Mother, perhaps we should find a compromise. He suggested for instance. We could get to know Clementine. Make up our own minds. I'm not going to meet that woman. Victoria. Cut him off. And I don't want Emmeline anywhere near her. Why not? I couldn't help myself. Are you afraid she'll infect your daughter with free will? Victoria turned pale with anger. How dare you, Dash? She hissed. After all we've done for you. We gave you a roof over your head when you were alone. We took you on this journey even though we could have spent the time just the three of us. And this is how you repay us. Getting ideas. From some promiscuous woman you've known for 3 days. Deep Victoria. Lawrence said warningly, but she couldn't stop herself. You know, I always told Lawrence it was a bad idea to keep you around, that you needed a nursing home with professional care and supervision. But he insisted. He said, my mother is sane enough to live with us. Now I see I was wrong. You're not sane. That's enough. I stood up. I won't listen to this. Not at my age. Not after all I've been through. Sit down, Mom. Lawrence stood up too. We haven't finished. And I am done, I said. Heading for the door. I'm going to Clementine's like I planned, and I don't want to continue this conversation. If you walk out that door, Victoria's voice was ringing with rage. You may not come back. I turned around, already gripping the doorknob. This isn't your house, Victoria, to tell you who can be in it. That this is my husband and my family. She jumped up. And I will not let you destroy what we've spent years building. What are you talking about? I honestly didn't understand. How could I destroy your family with your selfishness, my whims, by your blatant condemnation of our way of life? I've never judged your way of life, I said quietly. I'm just trying to find my own. Lawrence came over to me and put his hand on my shoulder. Mom, please let's talk calmly. Sit down. Have some tea. Let's discuss things like adults. I looked at his hand, then at his face, so much like his father's face at times when he tried to reason with me. No, Lawrence, I'm tired of talking that leads nowhere. I'm going to Clementine's. I opened the door, but Victoria was suddenly beside me, blocking my way. You don't realize what you're doing, she said. You're putting Joseph in danger. You're jeopardizing our family's reputation. Reputation, I grinned. How would my friendship with an artist damage your reputation? People will say that the mother of Lawrence Abernathy, the famous architect, is hanging out with a local eccentric of dubious reputation. It would hurt his career. I looked at my son, expecting him to object, to say that this was an exaggeration, that his career didn't depend on who his mother was friends with. But he remained insolent, his eyes downcast. I'm coming, I said firmly, and tried to step around Victoria. She grabbed my arm. You're not going anywhere. Not this time. You're going to do what's right for this family. Let me go. I tried to speak. Calmly, Booty could feel my voice shaking. Now, Victoria Lawrence took a step toward us. Let your mother go. We'll never get anywhere this way. No, her voice broke into a shriek. I've put up with enough. The 3 years I've put up with her passive aggression. But I will not tolerate open defiance. Disobedience. I couldn't believe my ears. You speak as if I were your child or your subordinate. What are you? She squeezed my hand tighter. You live in the house we bought. You eat the food we buy. Yowen on a trip we paid for. Victoria, Lawrence said loudly. Enough. He walked over and unclasped his wife's fingers, releasing my hand. Mother, he turned tone. Please don't go now. Let's all just calm down. I rubbed my wrist, which had red marks from Victoria's fingers. Dash. No. Lawrence. I'm leaving now. Now. I walked out, slamming the door, and heard Victoria shout. If she leaves, Lawrence, we're going back without her. I walked quickly away from the villa without turning around. Tears streaming down my cheeks. They were tears not so much of resentment as of release. It was as if a huge weight that I had been carrying for years had suddenly fallen from my shoulders. Clementine met me on the threshold of her studio with concern in her eyes. Theodora, what's wrong? I told her about the quarrel, about Victoria's. Words about her threat to leave without me. She listened without interrupting, only shaking her head. They can't just go away and leave you, she said when I was done. It's irresponsible. Victoria's bluffing, I shrugged. She thinks I'll freak out and come back with my tail between my legs. We spent the day in the studio. Clementine tried to distract me by showing me her work, introducing me to her artist friends, serving me homemade wine, but anxiety wouldn't let me go. What if Victoria wasn't bluffing? What if they really are leaving? By evening, I decided to return to the villa. Despite the morning's conflict, I couldn't imagine Lawrence really leaving without me. I'll walk Yao out, said Clementine as I was about to leave. No need. I know the way. I objected, but she was insistent. After what you told me about your sister-in-law, I'll feel better if I see that you have reached the villa safely. The villa greeted us with darkness and silence. Not a single light was burning in the windows. I took out my key and opened the door. Lawrence, Victoria, I called out as he entered the dark hallway. No one answered. I turned on the light and froze. The hallway was empty. The suitcases against the wall were gone. Gone were the jackets from the coat rack. Gone were Emmeline's baby shoes. Lawrence, I called louder, feeling my heart clench. Emmeline. Silence. I walked around the house, turning on the lights in every room. Empty. They were really gone. On the kitchen table was a note written in Lawrence's sprawling handwriting. Mum, we're leaving for Boston on the evening flight. Victoria is adamant, and I can't have Emmeline at the center of our conflict. There's food in the fridge for a few days. The villa is paid for another week. In that time, you can decide what to do next. I can book you a return ticket if you call me. I'm sorry it came out this way. Lawrence, I sank down in my chair, feeling my knees shake. They'd really gone. Left me alone in a foreign country, in a foreign city with limited means and almost no knowledge of the language. They're gone, I said out loud, still not believing it. Clementine, standing next to me, put her hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, Theodora. I had hoped you were wrong about them. I was silent, trying to comprehend what had happened. There were conflicting feelings inside me. Resentment, anger, fear, confusion. But strangely, amidst this chaos of emotions, there was something else. Something that felt like a relief. What am I going to do now? I muttered more to myself than to Clementine. Whatever you want, she answered simply. For the first time in me life, I looked at her, and in her eyes I saw not pity, not compassion, but something else. Confidence. Confidence that I could handle it. I can go home, I said, thinking out loud. Lawrence says he'll book me a ticket. You could, Clementine nodded. Or you could stay for a while to think. Decide what you really want. I looked at the note in my hands, at the empty kitchen, at my bag still hanging on my shoulder. Images flashed through my mind. The guest house in Lawrence's property. My small room. Evenings alone in front of the TV. Days filled with waiting for a call from my son that might not come. I don't know what I want, I admitted. I had never asked myself that question. It was always what others wanted. Then maybe would be a good time to find out. Clementine smiled. Don't rush into a decision. You have a week in this villa. Use it to understand yourself. I nodded, feeling something new brewing inside. Determination. I spent the first 3 days after Lawrence and Victoria left in a daze. I walked around the empty villa rereading me son's note. Sometimes crying, sometimes angry, but most of the time just sitting on the terrace looking out at the olive grove, trying to figure out what to do next. Clementine visited me every day, brought me fresh bread and fruit, tried to distract me by talking about art that did not pressure me or rush me into making decisions. On the 4th day, she came in with a bottle of red wine and a determined look on her face. Enough, Theodora, she said, placing the bottle on the table. That time for mourning your old life is over. It's time to think of a new one. I smiled involuntarily at her assertiveness. What do you suggest? First, a drink? She uncorked the bottle and poured the wine into glasses. And then we can talk about France. France? I raised my eyebrows in surprise. Yes, I think you should come to France with me. I took a sip of wine to hide my confusion. Clementine, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not even settled in Italy. Where would I go to France? Precisely because you're not. Here in Glenview, you'll be known as the American girl who was abandoned by her family. Small-town people love to gossip. In France, you'll just be Theodora, the American who decided to live in Europe. I thought about it. Her words made sense. Even now, as I went out to town to buy groceries, I noticed that stares and whispers behind me. News travels fast in small towns, but where would I go and with what money? I have some savings, but not much. I have a friend. Clementine smiled. More precisely, the former lover and now just a good friend, René Dubois. He owns a small winery in Provence in the village of S. Michel. He has a guest house which is now empty. You could stay there until you decide what to do next. And he'd just taken a stranger. I shook my head doubtfully. You're not a stranger. You're my friend. And Renee is the most hospitable person I know. Besides, she smiled slightly. His housekeeper quit recently. He needs someone to watch the house while he's busy in the vineyard. Are you asking me to be the housekeeper? I didn't know whether to laugh or take offense. I'm offering you an opportunity, Clementine said seriously. The opportunity to live in one of the most beautiful places on earth, to meet new people, to try something new. Andes, helping an elderly widower with a house in exchange for a roof over his head, isn't the worst deal to start with. I sipped more wine, feeling warm inside, not just from the alcohol, but from the thought of new possibilities. What about the language? I don't speak French. Renee speaks perfect English. He worked in the wine business in California for many years before returning to France. And French. Well, you'll have to learn it just like Italian if you were to stay here. I twirled my glass thoughtfully in me hands. You know, the weird thing is I don't even miss home. I admitted real home, not the guest house at Lawrence's. It was like I'd been living a life that wasn't my own all these years. And now that the connection was broken, I felt free. It's called a second wind. Clementine nodded. Many people find Italy when they're old. Some never. You're lucky, Theodora. Lucky that my son left me in a foreign country. I grinned bitterly. Lucky you met me. She winked and we both laughed. A week later, Clementine and I were on the train from Florence to Nice. I left a note for the villa manager thanking him and asking him to tell Lawrence if he came back that I was all right. Thejani. Across the border went smoothly. In the European Union, as Clementine had explained, the borders between countries are quite conventional. From the train window, I watched the scenery change. Tuscan hills with cypresses and olive groves were replaced by more rugged mountain vistas, and then the bright blue expanse of the Mediterranean Sea. In Nice, we were met by René, a tall, trimmed man in his 70s with a neatly trimmed grey beard and lively brown eyes. He hugged Clementine like an old friend and gallantly kissed my hand, introducing himself in perfect English with a slight French accent. Madame Abernathy, welcome to France. Clementine told me about your situation. I want you to know that my house is your home for as long as you need it. Just Theodora, please, I said, touched by his warmth. And thank you for your hospitality. I'll try not to abuse it, Theodora. He smiled, and the wrinkles around his eyes crinkled into rays. At my age, hospitality is one of the few pleasures I can still indulge in with impunity. We loaded my few belongings into his old but well-maintained Citroën and set off for Saint-Michel, a small village an hour's drive from Nice, deep in Provence. The road meandered between hills lined with pine and olive trees dot every now and then. There were views of the mountains in the distance or the sea left behind. René, as it turned out, was an excellent storyteller. He told the story of the region, of his family, who had owned vineyards since Napoleon's time, of how he had gone to America as a young man, married there, but returned home after his wife's death. America is beautiful, he said, as he deftly steered the car on the winding road. That it always looks to the future. And at my age, I'm beginning to appreciate the past and the present more. Saint-Michel turned out to be a tiny village of only 200. People, stone houses with terracotta roofs, narrow cobblestone streets, a central square with a fountain and a small church. It was reminiscent of Glenview, but even smaller, even more intimate. Reen's estate, Les Dubois, was on the outskirts of the village. It was an old stone house with blue shutters, buried in flowers and greenery. Behind the house were vineyards, running down the hillside to a small river. It was built by my great-grandfather in 1877, René said proudly as he helped me out of the car. Not much had changed since then, except for electricity and running water. The guest house where I was to stay was a charming little structure at the back of the garden. One room with a bed, a closet, and a desk, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom. Modern in spite of the old-fashioned look of the house. My housekeeper, Malene, used to live here, Renee explained. She married a baker from the neighboring village 2 months ago. Now she lives there and bakes the best bread in the neighborhood. It's very nice of you to take me in, I said, looking around the room, which seemed cozier than any hotel room. Don't be silly, he said. Clement is an old friend of mine, and Diala, her friend. Besides, he lowered his voice conspiratorially. My house has become a bachelor's den since Malene left. I'd be happy to have you help me clean it up for a decent fee. Of course. So began a new phase of my life as housekeeper to a French winemaker. Clementine stayed with us for a few days, helping me get settled in, and then left back to Italy, promising to visit. The first weeks were both difficult and magical. I learned how to run a household in French, communicate with local market vendors using vocabulary and gestures, and tried to cook local dishes using recipes that Renee translated into English for me. Renee turned out to be the perfect host. Tactful, patient, with a sense of humor. He worked in the vineyard most of the day, returned for dinner, which we often cooked together, and in the evenings taught me the basics of French. Repeat after me. J'appelle Theodora Giz America, he would say. And I would repeat, stuttering at the unfamiliar sounds. You have a good ear, he encouraged me. In a month, you'll be speaking like a Parisian. Of course, he was exaggerating, but I was really making progress. The need to interact with the locals every day, buying groceries or just saying hello on the street, made me learn faster than any course. Gradually, I began to find enjoyment in my new life. In morning walks through the vineyards when the air is still freshened, the sun is just starting to warm the hills. In trips to the local market where vendors were already recognizing me and greeting me with smiles. In evening conversations with Renee over a glass of his own wine as he told stories of his youth, his travels, the people he had met. During the second week of Miss Day, Renee offered to help me with the winery's bookkeeping. He was having trouble organizing the paperwork, and I, who had worked as an assistant bookkeeper before my marriage, had some experience. You don't have to, he said. It's not part of your duties as a housekeeper. But if you are interested, I am interested, I replied. Sincerely, I haven't done anything like this in a long time, but I can try. To my surprise, the skills I had thought I had long forgotten quickly returned. I got the ledgers in order, organized the accounts, and created a simple system for tracking expenses and income. Renee was impressed. You have a talent for numbers, he said, as he looked over my work and organization. You could run your own business. I laughed. At 67. A little late to start a career. Nonsense. He waved his hand. My mother started writing novels at 70 and published 12 books before she died at 86. It's never too late to start something new. His words made me wonder, what if it really isn't too late? What if this new life is not a temporary refuge, but a real chance to start over? Over the next few weeks, I immersed myself passionately in winery's paperwork. Renee not only entrusted me with the bookkeeping, but also began to educate me on the intricacies of the wine business. I learned about the different grappa varieties, the wine-making process, and the intricacies of marketing and sales. You know, he said one day when we were checking the accounts, I have an idea. Our wine is sold mostly locally and a little in Paris. But with your knowledge of English and American culture, we could enter the American market. The American market? I looked at him in surprise. But it's complicated. Customs regulations, licenses, distribution. Difficult but possible. He leaned toward me. I have old contacts in California, and you have a head on your shoulders and a fresh perspective. What do you say, Theodora? Would you like to be my partner in this little venture? I stared at him, not believing my ears. Partner me? But I didn't know anything about the wine business. I objected. You're a fast learner. He smiled. And you have qualities that can't be bought. Honesty, attention to detail, common sense. The rest can be learned. I couldn't sleep that night thinking about Reens. Offered Dot to become a partner in the wine business. At my age, after a life where my most serious decision was choosing dinner menu, it seemed crazy. And yet, I felt more alive, more energized than I had in decades. French came more easily to me than I expected. The paperwork was satisfying. And Renee believed in me more than I believed in myself. In the morning, I knocked on his office door. I'll do it, I said without preamble. I want to try to be your partner in this American project. His face lit up with a smile. Excellent. Then we shall celebrate. Dinner tonight at Liti Bistro, the best restaurant around. Our relationship with Renee developed gradually but steadily from formal employer and housekeeper socializing to friendship and then to something more. He was attentive but never intrusive, giving me space and time to settle into my new life and sort out my feelings. A month after my arrival, we were already working as a team on the project of introducing L'Eau de Bar wines to the American market. I was translating labels and marketing materials, corresponding with potential distributors and studying customs regulations. Renee joked that he didn't know how he'd manage without me before. And I didn't know how I'd manage without this new life. For the first time, I felt that I was doing something meaningful, that my mind, my abilities were valued and utilized. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who saw me as a person, not just someone's wife, mother, or grandmother. I was changing outwardly and inwardly. I changed my hairstyle, letting go of the hair that used to always put up in a strict bundle. I started wearing more colorful clothes bought in local stores. She smiled more, laughed louder, and expressed her thoughts and feelings more freely. The locals, initially wary of an American who suddenly appeared in their small village, gradually accepted me. I made friends with a baker who taught me French expressions, with the apothecary who shared the secrets of Provençal herbs, with an elderly neighbor who invited me to tea and told me stories about the village. My progress in French surprised even myself. After a month, I could hold simple conversations. And after 2 months, I could read simple texts and watch French movies with subtitles. Renee was a patient teacher, correcting my pronunciation, explaining grammar, and helping me expand my vocabulary. You're making amazing progress, Theodora, he said one day as we walked through the vineyard. In everything, in language, in work, in life. Because for the first time, I live for myself. I answered simply. And because I have you, you believe in me. He stopped and looked at me with such warmth that I felt the blood rush to my cheeks. I don't just believe in you, Theodora, he said quietly. I admire you, your courage, your determination, your ability to start over at an age when most people are just floating along. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever said those words to him. No one had ever seen anything admirable in me. Thank you, I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. He took my hand gently, and we continued our walk in silence. But it was the cozy, warm silence of two people who didn't need words to understand each other. Gradually, I began to discover talents I didn't even know I had. I discovered a taste for design. I created new labels for wines which Rini appreciated. I showed an unexpected aptitude for marketing, coming up with original approaches to promote French wines in the American market. I even began to take an interest in the wine-making process itself. And Renee was happy to fill me in on its mysteries. "You're blossoming, Theodora," Renee told me one day, as we looked at samples of the new labels I had designed. "Every day, you are becoming more and more yourself." And it was true. I felt like I'd been wrapped up in a cocoon my whole life. And now I was finally out of it and spreading my wings. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to be myself. Wasn't trying to conform to someone else's expectations. Wasn't adjusting to someone else's ideas of what a woman of my age and position should be. In the evenings, Renee and I often sat on the terrace of his house, drank wine, looked at the stars, and talked about the past, the present, their future, about books, about music, about art, about life and death, love and loss. They were the deepest, most real conversations of my life. And I realized that I hadn't just found a new home or a new job, I had found a new me. I never thought that at 67 years old, my life was just beginning. 3 months in France changed me more than all the years before. Every morning I woke up with a sense of anticipation, eager to see what the new day would bring. I no longer existed. I lived. My partnership with Renee had grown into a true partnership. I went from being a housekeeper to managing the business in charge of finance, marketing, and exports. We opened a small online store to sell wines to the States. And I was surprised to discover that I had a business acumen that I hadn't even realized I had before. "You're a real strategist, Theodora," Renee said when I suggested a new distribution scheme that cut costs by 30%. "If I had met you 40 years ago, we would already own half the wineries in Provence. If you had met me 40 years ago, I would have been a very different person," I replied. A frightened housewife who was afraid of her own shadow. Renee shook his head. "No, Theodora. I'm sure the real you was always inside. It's just that no one gave you a chance to express yourself. I've often thought about that, about what my life might have been like if I hadn't met Apprentice, if I'd gotten an education, if I'd built a career. But I reminded myself that there was no point in regretting the past. I had a present that was bright, vibrant, full of possibilities, and there was a future I could build as I saw fit. My relationship with Renee evolved slowly but steadily, from business partners to friends, from friends to something more. He never rushed things, always leaving room to maneuver, to back off if I felt uncomfortable. One evening, as we sat on the terrace with glasses of wine, watching the sunset that painted the vineyards a golden pink, Renee suddenly took my hand. "Theodora," he said quietly, "I know that we've only known each other for a few months and that you went through a lot of hardships before you ended up here. But I want you to know that you have changed my life. Before you showed up, I just existed, doing chores, clinging to memories. Now I'm living again." I squeezed his hand, feeling the lump in my throat. "You changed my life too, Renee. You showed me it's never too late to start over." "And now?" "What?" he asked, looking into my eyes. "What's next for us?" I wondered. All the previous relationships in my life had been either imposed on me or shoved into the confines of tradition and convention. For the first time, I could make my own choices, decide for myself what I wanted. "I don't know," I admitted honestly, "but I'd like to find out together with you." He smiled and touched my hand lightly with his lips. It was the best answer I could get. From that night on, our relationship took on a new dimension. We didn't rush. We didn't force things, but there was a new intimacy between us, emotional and physical, light touches, hugs, sometimes kisses. It was so different from my experience with Apprentice, where intimacy had always been an obligation, not a pleasure. Renee valued qualities in me that I didn't even know existed. My open-mindedness, what he called American candor, which allowed me to see opportunities where others saw only problems. My sincerity, my ability to say what I think without trying to please or fit in, and surprisingly, my taste, a sense of style and beauty that has always been in me, but never had a chance to manifest itself. You have an artist's eye, Theodora, he said when I showed him the new label design for our wine, inspired by the local lavender fields. You see colors and shapes the way only true artists do. It's all Clementine's influence, I said, embarrassed. She's the one who taught me to see differently. No. Renee shook his head. Clementine only helped you discover what was already in you. No one can be taught to see beauty unless they have it naturally. At his suggestion, they began to do not only label, design, but also the design of our website, catalogs, promotional materials. To my surprise, this work brought me great satisfaction. I felt that I had finally found a way of self-expression that suited me. Outwardly, I was changing too. My grey hair, which I used to always put in a strict bun, now fell freely on my shoulders. I replaced the faceless beige and grey outfits with bright dresses that I bought in small boutiques in Nice and Aix-en-Provence. I started wearing makeup, not to hide Miage, but to emphasize my facial features, which suddenly seemed not so bad. You're radiant, Renee said to Mies. I came down to dinner wearing the new blue dress and silver earrings Clementine had given me on my last visit, literally glowing from the inside out. And I could feel that glow. It came from a newfound confidence, from the feeling that I was finally being myself, from the joy of living that I had suppressed for so long. Our business was booming too, thanks to my connections with American distributors who were really just acquaintances of Clementine. But Renee didn't need to know that. We started sending small shipments of wine to the United States on a regular basis. I negotiated, drew up the contracts, and kept track of the shipments. Renee joked that he would soon have to hire a new vineyard manager because I had turned him into an office worker. You're aerial businesswoman, Theodora, he said proudly. If my old friends in California saw how you do business, they would offer you a job in their companies. I've already found my company, I replied, and my partner. Our evenings often ended on theatre race where we sat holding hands and talking about everything in the world. Politics and art, travel and books, the past and the future. Sometimes we were just silent, enjoying each other's presence and the beauty of the world around us. On one such evening, when Thea was scented with jasmine and lavender, and the stars seemed especially bright, Renee suddenly got down on one knee in front of me. Theodora, he said, taking a small box out of his pocket. I know that we have known each other only 4 months and that at our age it may seem ridiculous, but I don't want to lose a day. Will you be my wife? I looked at him at the silver ring with the small sapphire in the open box at the vineyards below, and felt time stop. My whole being was screaming yes, but some part of me was still afraid, still doubting, still remembering life with Apprentice. Renee, I started, but he interrupted me gently. Don't Insuerno. Think about it. The ring will be waiting for you, and so will I. I'm in no hurry. And in that moment, I realized I loved him. I loved him for his patience, for his respect for my feelings, for the space he always gave me to make my own decisions. Yes, I said, tears welling up in my eyes. Yes, Renee, I will marry you. His face lit up with such joy, such tenderness that all my doubts vanished. He put the ring on my finger and we kissed like teenagers under the starry skies of Provence. We decided to have a small wedding in 2 months, a simple ceremony at the town hall in Saint Michel, followed by a dinner for close friends. Clementine, who was to be my witness, arrived a week for the event and helped with the preparations. I'm so happy for you, she said as we picked out flowers to decorate the house together. When I first saw you on that hill in Glenview, you looked so lost, so faded. And now look at you. You're radiant. Thanks to you. I hugged her. If it wasn't for you, I never would have gotten here. Never met Renee. Never would have found myself. I just showed you the door. She winked. You decided to walk in on your own. 2 days before the wedding, when Clementine and I were coming back from the market where we were buying the last little things for the party, I saw them. Lawrence and Victoria were standing by the fountain in the central square, obviously looking. For someone, my heart skipped a beat and then doubled over. It's them, I whispered to Clementine, my son and his wife. Clementine followed my gaze and frowned. How did they find you? I sent Lawrence the address when I first moved here. I sighed. In case something happened to him or Emmeline. But he never answered, never called. And now they're here. Clementine squeezed my hand. What do you want to do? I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. Part of me wanted to turn around and run away, hide in Renee's house, and never come out. But the other part, the new confident Theodora I'd become over the months, knew that sooner or later I'd have to face my son. Let's go to them, I said firmly. The sooner we get through this, the better. We crossed the square, and Lawrence was the first to notice us. His eyes widened in surprise and he said something to Victoria. She turned around and her face froze. In an unpleasant trimus, Mom, Lawrence took a step forward. Is it really you? I understood as surprise. The last time he'd seen me, my hair was bunched up in a faceless beige suit, hunched and insecure. Now there stood before him a woman with loose silver hair, wearing a bright blue dress, her back straight and her head up. Hello, Lawrence, I said calmly. Hello, Victoria. What brings you to France? You, Lawrence answered, and there was a strange note in his voice, a mixture of irritation and confusion. We came to take Yo home. Home? I raised an eyebrow. My home is here now. Don't be silly, Mom, Victoria interjected. You can't live in a foreign country, not knowing language without support. Without I speak French, I interrupted her. Not perfect, but enough for everyday life. I have support. I nodded at Clementine. I have a job, friends, and a husband on the way. Husband question. Lawrence looked like I'd slapped him. What are you talking about? I'm getting married. I held up my hand, showing him the ring in 2 days. To Renee Dubois, the owner of the winery where I work. Victoria made a sound like a chuckle. Is this some kind of joke, or have you completely lost your head? You're 67 years old. Theodora dots, so I looked her straight in the eye. Renee is 71. We're both adults capable of making decisions. It's all your influence. Victoria turned to Clementine. First, you persuaded her to stay in Italy. Now, you've got her involved in some kind of adventure with marriage. What do you want from her? Money? I can. That's enough. Victoria. My voice was firmer than ever. Clementine is my friend. She helped me when you abandoned me in a foreign country, and I won't let you insult her. Lawrence looked confused. Mother, listen, he said conciliatingly. We realized that we did wrong then in Italy. I was stressed. Victoria was upset. We shouldn't have left you. I regretted it every day. But now we're here to make it right. To go. Home together. Home? I shook my head. You keep using that word, Lawrence, but your home stopped being mine the moment you chose your wife over your mother. It's not fair, he frowned. You put me in front of an impossible choice. Not me, but Victoria, I countered. And you made your choice. I respect it. Now respect me. Victoria, who had been momentarily rendered speechless by my rebuff, nor rejoined the conversation. You can't just run away from your responsibilities, she said. You have a granddaughter who misses you. You have Emmeline can come to me on vacation. I smiled, imagining my granddaughter running among the vineyards. I'd be happy to see her, but I'm not going back to Boston. Lawrence looked as if he didn't recognize me. What happened to you, Mother? He asked. You are different. I am myself. Now, Lawrence, I answered simply. For the first time in years. Victoria grabbed her husband's arm. It doesn't make sense, she said. She's completely out of it. But we need to talk to this her fiancé. Explain the situation. The situation? I could feel my anger rising. What situation, Victoria? That a grown woman has decided to live her own life. That she no longer wanted to be a convenient babysitter to be used when needed and ignored when. Not, Mum, Lawrence said warningly. But I couldn't stop now. You left me, abandoned me in a foreign country with minimal resources. You didn't even call to see if I was alive, Dot. And now you show up and think you can just take me home like luggage you forgot in the luggage room. I saw Lawrence's face contort in pain and shame. Part of me, that old used to pleasing Theodora, wanted to apologize to soften my words. But the new Theodora knew that every word was the truth, and he needed to hear it. I have called, he said quietly. Several times. You didn't answer. I changed my number when I moved to France. I answered, and I sent you the new one in a message. You didn't answer. He lowered his eyes, and I realized he was lying. He hadn't called, didn't try to contact me. He just made that excuse when he decided it was Tomato bring my mom home. Look, Clementine intervened, seeing that the situation was escalating. Why don't we discuss this in a calmer setting? Theodora Renishold be back from the vineyard soon. Why don't we invite your son and his wife to dinner? Introduce them to your future husband. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Good idea, I nodded. Lawrence, Victoria, you're invited to dinner tonight. 8 o'clock. Clementine will show you the way. We'll find her on our own. Victoria said coldly. What hotel are you staying at? I'm not at an inn, I replied. I'm staying at Lodi du Bois. It's your fiance's winery. Fiancé. Victoria finished for me with undisguised sarcasm. Well, find it. She tugged Lawrence's arm and they headed away from us. My son looked back once, and in his gaze, I read a mixture of emotions: bewilderment, resentment, but also something akin to respect. You behaved beautifully, Clementine said when they were out of sight. Just like a real French woman. I laughed, feeling the tension leave me. It was the strangest compliment I'd ever gotten. But inside, I knew she was right. I did hold myself with a dignity I'd never shown before. I hadn't relented. I hadn't apologized. I hadn't put someone else's wishes before my own. That evening, when I told Renee about Lawrence and Victoria's unexpected appearance, he listened attentively and then hugged me tightly. Whatever happens tonight, remember that I'm with you, he said, and your decision to stay or go is yours alone. I'll support whatever choice you make. I kissed him, grateful for those words, for the unconditional support I'd never gotten before. I'm staying, I said firmly. I belong here with you. The doorbell rang at 8 sharp. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and went to meet my son and his wife, ready for any turn of events. I opened the door and saw Lawrence and Victoria standing on the doorstep of Renee's house. My son looked tense, his shoulders unnaturally straightened as if he were preparing for battle. Victoria stood nearby, clutching a small designer handbag, her face cold and assessing as she surveyed the ancient facade of the house. Good evening, I said quietly. Come in, please. They walked down the hall, and he noticed Victoria scrutinizing every detail of the interior. The ancient beams on the ceiling, the stone walls, the antique furniture. Her gaze was that of an appraiser calculating the value of a property. Meet René Dubois, introduced my fiancé, who came out of the living room to meet us. René, this is my son Lawrence and his wife Victoria. René greeted them with exquisite French courtesy, which seemed to embarrass Lawrence a bit. My son mumbled some sort of greeting and Victoria extended her hand, as if she expected René to kiss it. Instead, he simply shook her hand and led everyone into the living room where a pair of teeths had already been served. You speak English very well, Mr. Dubois, Victoria said when we were seated. I spent 20 years in California, René smiled. I worked in the wine business. And please just call Emmy René. And when did you meet my Theodora? Lawrence asked, taking a glass of a pair of teeth. About 4 months ago, René replied. Clementine brought her back from Italy. We hit it off right away. 4 months. Victoria stretched out. And already a wedding. Isn't that too hasty? I felt irritation rising in me. But René put his hand on mine, reassuring. Emmy, at our age we don't have the luxury of long engagements, he said with a smile. When you know you found the right person, why wait? And you're sure you found the right person? Victoria's voice was full of ill-concealed sarcasm. You know next. To nothing about Theodora, her past, her psychological state. Victoria, Lawrence exclaimed. It's all right. I raised my hand. I understand Victoria's concern. It's true. René has only known me for 4 months. But in that time, we've worked together every day, lived under the same roof, shared joys and hardships. Sometimes 4 months of sick intimacy gives more insight into a person than years of formal socializing. Victoria snorted. Work together? You mean you looked after the house while Hugh went about his business? Actually, René interjected. Theodora has become an indispensable part of my business. She manages the finances, leads the marketing strategy, is responsible for exports to the United States. Thanks to her, our sales increased 30% in the last quarter. I saw Lawrence choke on his wine, and Victoria's eyes widened in surprise. Mom, running a business? Lawrence looked as if he'd been informed that his mother was suddenly an astronaut. Why? Does that surprise you so much, Lawrence? I asked calmly. Before I was married, I worked as an assistant accountant. I always had a head for numbers. But you've always been a housewife. I finished for him. Yes, because your father thought a woman's place was in the home. And after he died, you and Victoria decided that an elderly mother's place was in the guest house on your property, supervised and controlled. Lawrence looked fussed, as if he didn't recognize me. Victoria quickly recovered from her surprise and went on the offensive. We gave you a home, a care, a family, she said. And you repaid us with this, the running away, the scandal, and now this ridiculous wedding. Ridiculous? I raised an eyebrow. Why ridiculous, Victoria? Because I dared to find happiness without your permission. Because you're acting like a teenager. She raised her voice, running away from home, associating with dubious individuals, making reckless decisions. Madame, Reen's voice grew noticeably colder. I would ask you to watch your words in my house. Your house? Victoria gave Therum a dismissive glance. Yes, quite impressive for a provincial winemaker. I wonder what attracted you to Theodore. Maybe the fact that she has a small savings that could be useful for your Bessiness. Enough. I stood up. Abruptly. I will not have you insulting René in his own home. If you can't behave in a civilized manner, perhaps we should cut this dinner short. Mother, please. Lawrence stood up as well. Victoria did mean that. We're just worried about you. This whole thing seems so strange. You've always been so sensible, so obedient. I finished for him. Comfortable. Yeah, I've been like that for too long. But people change, Lawrence. Sometimes they just need an opportunity. At that moment, Clementine, who had been helping in the kitchen, appeared and announced that dinner was ready. The tense group moved into the evening room where a traditional Provençal was served. Ratatouille, bouillabaisse, homemade bread, and of course wine from René's vineyards. Over dinner the conversation became a little less tense. René, showing wonders of diplomacy, asked Lawrence about his architectural projects, and the latter, flattered by the attention, gradually thawed. Victoria wasn't, only occasionally interjecting wry remarks, but I decided not to react to them. Tell me about Emmeline, I asked when dessert was served. How ish? Does she miss her grandmother? Lawrence perked up. She misses her. Yes. She asks about you a lot. She's at summer camp now, so she couldn't come with us. She could come here on vacation, I suggested. It's great for kids here. Fresh air, nature, helping with the grape harvest. We won't let Emmeline go to another country alone. Victoria said she could come with Lawrence. I looked at my son. You could. Bring her, show her Europe. It would be good for her education. Lawrence looked interested, but Victoria quickly intervened. We have our own plans for Emmeline's education, and they don't include socializing with a grandmother who abandoned the family. I didn't abandon anyone, I said firmly. It was you who left me in Italy. Remember, after you chose the company of this woman. Victoria nodded toward Clementine. Instead of your family, I chose the opportunity to be me. I countered, and it turned out to be the best choice of my life. After dinner, went back to the living room for coffee. The tension was building again, and I sensed that the climax of the evening was coming. Lawrence walked around the room looking at the paintings on the walls, and then stopped at the window overlooking the vineyards. It's beautiful here, he said suddenly. It's very peaceful. Yes, I stood next to him. This is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And now it's my home. He turned to me and I saw in his eyes a mixture of emotions. Bewilderment, resentment, but also something like admiration. You've really changed, Mom, said quietly. I hardly recognize you. I've always been like that, Lawrence, I answered. I just never let myself show it. First because of my father, then because of you and Victoria. Because of us, he frowned. We never stopped you from being you. Not forbidden by words, I agreed. But we created an environment where I could only exist by being comfortable, quiet, invisible. As soon as I showed character, you and Victoria, like, we what? Victoria interrupted. A Prochingus. Taking care of you, put a roof over your head, provided you with everything you needed. Controlling my every move, I said calmly. Decided what I could cook when I could see my granddaughter. How I should dress. Victoria, you even told me what color the wall should be in my room. I was just giving design advice. Dash, she exclaimed. You could have said no. I could have, I nodded. But we all know what would have happened if I had said no. Coldness, passive aggression, endless hints that I was ungrateful. You're a master of these tools, Victoria. Lawrence shifted his gaze from to his wife, as if he saw us both in a new light. Mother, I don't think Victoria. Lawrence, I put my hand on his shoulder. You never saw it because you didn't want to see it. You were comfortable thinking that everything was fine, that your wife and your mother were getting along just fine. But they weren't. It never had been. Victoria made a sound like a cuckle. And now you're blaming us for your escape, for your crazy decisions. I'm not blaming anyone. I shook my head. I'm just explaining why I won't go back to that life. I found myself here in France. I found love, a job that is satisfying. Friends who appreciate me for who I am. Love. Victoria rolled her eyes. At 67 with a man you've known for 4 months. It's not love, Theodora. It's despair. Fear of loneliness. Perhaps even a sign of incipient dementia. Victoria. Lawrence looked shocked. What? She turned to him. Someone has to tell the truth. Your mother is acting irrationally. She needs help. She needs specialist care. And instead some French winemaker is taking advantage of her vulnerability. And I think I've had enough. Reen's voice was suddenly loud. He came over to us and stood next to me. Madame. I have tolerated your insinuations all evening out of respect for Theodora, but there is a line I will not allow you to cross. Theodora is the most rational, balanced, and intelligent woman I have ever met, and I don't love her out of pity or any selfish motive. I love her for her strength of spirit, for her kindness, for her sharp mind, for her ability to see beauty in simple things. And I will protect her from anyone who tries to humiliate her or question her ability to make decisions. I looked at Renee with gratitude and love. No one had ever defended me like that. No one had ever stood up for me. Lawrence. I turned to my son. I realize it's hard for you to accept my change, but I'm asking you to respect my choice. I'm marrying Renee. I'm staying in France. That doesn't mean I'm no longer your mother or Emmeline's grandmother. It's just that I'm living my life now, not yours. Lawrence looked lost, torn between Victoria and me, between his usual ideas and his new reality. I just want you to be happy, Mom, said finally. And safe. I am happy. I smiled for the first time in years, and I'm safe. I have Renee, Clementine, new friends. I have a job that gives me independence. I have a future of my own choosing. Victoria grabbed her purse. This doesn't make sense, she said sharply. She doesn't want to listen to the voice of reason. Lawrence, we were leaving. My son hesitated, looking at his wife and me. Maybe we should stay another day, he suggested. Get acquainted with Mom's new life. Makaja, everything's okay. Do you really believe this farce? Victoria raised her voice. An unwed woman running away from her family. Living with a man she barely knows. Working in a winery with no experience. That's not life, Lawrence. It's a soap opera. It may be a farce to you. I remained calm. But Tome, it's reality. A reality I've chosen and I'm happy with. Happy? Victoria snorted. Until the first problem. Until the first fight with your fiancé. Until first financial hardship. And then what? You'll come crawling back to US expecting us to take you in again. No, Victoria. I shook my head. I will never come back to you. Even if my relationship with Renee doesn't work out. Even if the business goes under. Even if I'm alone, I'd rather scrub floors in a cafe on the square than go back to the life you imposed on me. Lawrence looked as if I'd hit him. Mom, you can't be serious. We're a family. Family? I grinned bitterly. Family doesn't abandon each other in a foreign country, Lawrence. Family doesn't control every move. Family doesn't humiliate or manipulate. What we had wasn't family. It was a toxic bomb that suffocated me. I can't listen to this. Victoria headed for the door. Lawrence. We're leaving now. My son stood torn between me and my wife, between past and present. Lawrence, I took his hand. I'm not asking you to choose between Victoria and me. I'm only asking you to accept that I'm living your life now, and I would be happy for you and Emmeline to be a part of that life on my terms. He stared at me for a long moment as if seeing me for the first time. Then he nodded slowly. Yeah, I'll try to understand, Mother, and I'll bring Emmeline if that's what you really want. More than anything, I smiled. Lawrence. Victoria's voice was ringing with rage. Now he looked at me again, then at Renee, then awkwardly shook my fiancé's hand and quickly followed his wife out the door. I heard the front door slam and the engine of their rental car start. Renee put his arm around Miss Holder's, and we walked out onto the terrace together. In the distance, I could see the lights of a car on the road. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Yes, I breathed deeply of the night air, scented with lavender and grapes. I was fine, and it was true. As I watched the lights of the carrying my son and his wife away, I felt no bitterness or regret, only the quiet certainty that I had done the right thing, that I had finally broken the chains that had bound me all my life. "They'll be back," Clementine said, coming toward us. "Lawrence, at least he loves you. He just needs time to get used to the new you." "Maybe," I shrugged. "But even if he doesn't, I won't be sorry. I'm finally living the life I want, and no price is too high for that freedom." Renee kissed my temple. "To freedom," he whispered. "To freedom," I echoed, staring up at the starry Provence sky. Above our heads, as vast and full of possibilities as my new life. The lights of the car disappear a door in the corner. I felt the last thread tying me to the past finale break. Not with the bitterness of a breakup, but with a quiet release. I was ready to move on, ready for a wedding in 2 days, ready for a future I had created on my own, without regard for other people's expectations and demands. My heart was calm. My thoughts were clear. I had found my path. I had found myself, and no one else could take that freedom away from me.